Don't do this.
We know you hear it. We know when we tap.
We're back again with another episode of Conversations About God.
That's David Bouton.
Casey Stagg.
I'm David Bouton. That's Casey Stagg.
Ryan
This
McKenzie.
is Ryan McKenzie. We're going to mess that up every time.
That's the first time I ever want to start that over again, but you know what? We're going to leave it just because
Plow through.
we don't like editing around here. So this is a real podcast.
Raw
and uncut, and you get our real thoughts and emotions. So that's another way of saying we don't prepare. But we actually just sat here and talked for 20 minutes figuring out what we're going to say about this whole thing. But hey, we're talking about faith today. What does it mean to have faith? What is faith? You hear it a lot in churches. You hear it a lot in religious topics and thoughts and books and all kinds of things like that. I'll just start this off with a quick story. My mom, Karen, you're out there somewhere. Yes, my mom's name's Karen. Stop making fun of her, guys. She said she left the church when she was in college because her parents said, and she had questions and doubts about things, they said, Karen, just have faith. You just got to have faith. And she'd always be like, faith in what? What does that mean? What does having faith mean? And no one could ever give her an answer. So it was maybe unfair to them, but she never got the answer she wanted on what faith meant. So she decided, I'm done with this. And now she's years later come back, and now she is a Christian and has faith. But my big question right now to start this off is, what is faith? If we say you just got to have faith, you just got to believe, what does that mean?
So I'll start. So we were talking about it before, to simplify or sum it up, I think we all agree that it just comes down to trust, right? If we put it in one word, that we're not trying to, manufacture things in our own life, but we're putting our trust in God that He is going to do what He says He's going to do in the Word, and that the claims about Christ and what Jesus said about Himself are true, and we put our trust in that and our faith in that. It's not necessarily works or acts that we do, but it is an act of faith, I guess you could say, but it's simply saying, God, I put my trust in you as you are who you say you are, and what you say about me, I believe that. I trust that is true for me.
That's much better than my response. I was going to say, Limp Bizkit has a really great song about having faith. You got to have faith. And,
George Michael.
Well, Limp Bizkit really made it really powerful for me in my day. You can age yourself there if you want to with George Michael, but
I don't think I've ever been more deeply disappointed in you as a friend than this moment. So
that says a lot, guys. He's been disappointed in me so many times.
Many times. This is the pigsty.
Very little faith in me right now.
Very little. So I'm going to trust that you're going to say better things for the rest of this podcast. So when we are talking about faith, I've heard it put in a description like my faith in God is similar. Like there's an example in marriage. Like I have trust in my wife to not go out and cheat on me based on the evidence so far that I have in my marriage, that she has not. She's only shown me faithfulness, that what she said when we got married, she's going to continue in doing and honoring our marriage. So one of the ways that I look at my faith is in that what Christianity, what the claims of Jesus are, and what my experience walking with Him have been, is that He is trustworthy in what He says He will do. Now, the timing and when He fulfills certain things, that's a whole other discussion. But when He says, I place the lonely in families, I've experienced that. And I can trust Him in those things. So He only proves that He's reliable, like my wife is reliable in being faithful to me.
All right, so I like this a lot, because having faith in someone who's been faithful, or someone who is faithful, is proving that makes sense to me. What if, I want to challenge you on this a little bit and get your perception on it. What if I'm someone who does not believe in God, or has not chosen to put my faith in Him, and I'm kind of like, I don't see that faithfulness on me. My life's not going great maybe, or I like the way my life's going. It's all been on me. It's all been myself. I don't see His faithfulness in my life. And how can I know that He's faithful to put my faith in Him? Like, why should I make that transition? That wasn't the direction we were going to go when we were talking about this, but since you brought that up, I'm completely throwing a curveball. Do you have thoughts on that?
I was really bad at hitting curveballs when I played baseball, which is why I stopped playing baseball.
Weren't we all? This guy was.
to make sure I understand what you're asking, if somebody who is not believing, why should they place their trust in God when they have not experienced
I could
that?
understand, like, man, look how great this God is.
Sure.
My life, all the blessings, all the great stuff. But what if something like, I haven't experienced that. Why should I make that leap? Why should I change allegiance? Why should I decide to start this life instead?
Sure. Well, I disagree with the word leap. I think to trust in Christianity is really more of a small step, because there are a lot of things. So I'll say this: to believe in Christianity is a miracle, because what we see in Scripture is it is the Father that reveals Himself to people, and it is on that basis that they even have the ability to believe Him. So I would never begrudge somebody because they don't have faith. I would never try to be angry with them or say you idiot, because it's a miraculous thing that takes place. It is. Yeah. Jesus says, "You didn't choose me, I chose you." Right? So the choosing initially happens by Him. Now, so in that, I don't blame them, but I would definitely say, but you do owe it to yourself to explore, if this is even a possibility, to see where it can be trusted. And this is where I anybody who's skeptical about whether Christianity is true, I say investigate the resurrection claims and the testimony of people who did trust it, and see if there's anything trustworthy there.
I like that.
And if there are other explanations that give some kind of an answer, see how trustworthy those are and explore how trustworthy all those claims can be, and then choose the one that is most reliable. And to me, that is that Jesus rose from the dead. And
if we had all of that knowledge and everything all lined up and it was perfect on paper, and then we chose to say, yes, that is right, that wouldn't be faith, right? Because it's all proven. It's all, we're just, yep, that's a fact, that happened. But then that eliminates faith. That's just saying, yep, I agree with this looks good. Where it does boil down to faith. Like, there is some unknown in it. Yep. To your point, the person that has never experienced God, that's all unknown.
Sure.
So it is still faith. I get your argument where we can now, being believers for years, we can look back and say, I saw God move this, and that builds our faith as Christians. But for someone who's never experienced God before and they're currently an unbeliever, that would be a tough argument to say, hey, look at it. But at the end of the day, it boils down to putting our faith in Him, because it's unknown.
I like the answer of looking at specific evidence, because faith is the hope in things we have not seen, right? It is the it's actually the substance. It's actually a real thing we're putting our faith into. It's not just like this mythical, just have faith and things will work out, believe that things will work out. But if you haven't seen His faithfulness in your life, I love that idea of go look at the evidence of His life rather than your life, because there's no guarantee in the Bible that my life's going to turn out great if I'm a believer or not, right? There's no guarantee that I'm going to get what I think I want, right? Or that I'm going to get the wife or the job or the money or the kid. Everything could just be horrible, right? In my own perception of what I think I should get. But is it not worth looking into what His life was and who He is? And if I just decide, well, because I haven't seen it in my life yet, I'm never going to, I think is a logical fallacy. We just get caught up in emotion of it, just to say, well, because it's never happened, it never will, is rough. I think that's a bad choice to make. But to go back and say, well, did the resurrection actually happen? What did people that saw it or claim that they saw it actually say? So, and then everything in life is an element of faith, because sure, those texts could have been doctored, but if you want to say that, but so could have Shakespeare's.
Right.
I think there's more evidence that Jesus existed and rose from the dead than Shakespeare actually existed. If you really look at who wrote down and how it was recorded and all that kind of stuff, it's really fascinating. If you want to look at the historical side of it, is really, that grows my faith a lot. I think it's a really cool point. So I like that idea of faith. You have more thoughts?
Just a thought on, I do hear with some frequency this statement when it comes to people who have put their faith in Christianity and in the person of Jesus, that they said it's a leap of faith. And I don't think it's a big leap. I think it's a small, it's actually not a whole lot. That it's not blind faith either. That's the other statement that I'm like, that blind faith has never really been a part of what has grown my faith. It has always been, there's not, it's not putting faith in something that I have no evidence for. There's a lot of evidence for it, I don't have enough to like prove concretely to everybody on the face of the earth that this is the way, but I have a lot to say, very likely.
Yeah.
So that I take a step of faith to believe it is not a leap. And it's not blind, because it's not complete darkness. I have so many indicators, so many tests of truth to say this is trustworthy.
Well, if you put that, I think it's really easy to say, oh, well, that's the cop-out Christians use, is that you have to have that step of faith, that leap of faith, whatever you want to call it. But if you really put that same standard on everything in our lives of what we're looking at, like
Certainly.
Even to get in my car and to like drive it down the road, I have to have faith. Like, I'm not a mechanic. I don't know if the brakes are going to work every time I drive down the road. Like, are we putting the same scrutiny to every other aspect of our life, or is it just the fact that I don't know if God's going to come through for me, or I don't know that He's actually real, or I don't know that Christianity, right?
That's good.
It's the same scrutiny the whole way through. Would be consistent at least. So why is it important? Say we have it. Why do I need it? Why is faith important?
So it's talked about a lot in Scripture. There's one verse that pops off the page for me in Hebrews. It says it's impossible to please God without it. So it limits our relationship with God without any faith, right? If we're just going through the motions, or we're never put in a position in our life where our faith is actually challenged or where it's needed. Because I think a lot of times when life is good and it's easy, you don't know if you have faith or not. It's when you're going through troubled times and you're being challenged, and you got to lean on God. And I think that's when things are exposed, right? That's when things are brought up to the surface and you're really challenged to say, do I have faith, or was I just, believing in my own abilities or believing in my own strength and not actually trusting in God and relying on God? So that's important, because it's impossible to please God without it, right?
Yeah, I like that. Like, it talks about, we're going through a sermon series right now. Pastor Peter just started with called Big Faith, right? Having big faith. And Hebrews actually talks about Abraham, how he believed God, and it was like counted to him as righteous. Like, he's like, you're good because you believed, not just because of all the stuff that you did. So like, this is the guy who's a founding father of this faith, right? And it wasn't because he was so good, or because he had some great skill, or because he did something. Because he believed. God came to him and said something. He said, okay, let's do it. Like, it's like he was counted as righteous because he believed.
And that is how somebody is saved. Not by doing a thing, but by trusting what God says He'll do.
Right.
That's immediate, it knocks out works righteousness from the get-go, starting with Abraham. I'll get this question actually with some frequency from people exploring their faith either deeper, or somebody who is just like, what's Christianity all about? But they'll say, well, how did God save people in the Old Testament? It was faith. Like, those people were saved because they believed what He was saying about the coming Messiah. So righteousness,
it's like it's all one
faith.
story or something, rather than two separate stories. It's like there's a plan the whole way through or something. I don't know. It's a thread. Yeah, that's good. So, any more thoughts on why faith is important? You have something you want to...
Yeah, something that encourages me, and hopefully will encourage anybody who's listening when it comes to faith. And let's talk about amounts, right?
Yeah, like
what's the proper amount of faith to have, right?
I'll take 2 scoops of faith, please.
2 faith scoops, and I'll believe for 3. And then a 4th. No.
I don't know what's happening right now.
I don't think anybody does.
I don't think you do.
I don't either. I forgot what I was going to say. No. So there's a scripture in Acts, and it's in Acts, I believe, chapter 12 is what I was looking up. And I won't forget it, because it's Peter was in jail, and the church got together and prayed for his release. And then there's this miraculous him getting released from prison, and that whole chapter is worth the read for anybody who's listening to this. Go read that whole chapter. It's pretty amazing. And so he gets released from prison, and then comes to the place where the people who were praying for him were at, and he's knocking on the door to be let in, and this little girl runs up to the door, hears that it's Peter, is so excited she doesn't even open the door. And she runs into the prayer meeting and says, it's him, Peter's here, he's at the door. And they look at her and they say, you're out of your mind. Like, they're sitting here praying, oh Lord, please release Peter from prison. He shows up at the door, she comes in and they're like, yeah, right. Can't have happened. You're crazy.
It's like that prayer you pray just because, like, you know you're supposed to, and if you say it out loud, it makes you sound like a good person.
Go through
like,
the motions.
Everyone knows I'm praying for this person, but they're probably never gonna get it. Or everybody knows that I want this, but it's probably never gonna happen. But it's like, what's the word that people say that bothers me so much? It's like, in faith, I'm believing it's going to happen. In faith, I think, you're going to get that new job? Well, in faith, it'll happen. Like, yes or no, man? Like, do you want it or not? Like, it's almost like this cop-out, like, well, if... I get it. It's God's will. Sure. It's His timing, yes. But having faith does not mean you're just like, in faith, maybe if He wants to. Like, do you believe He can or not? Right. Is He going to or not? Like, let's... there's some things we believe for that don't actually come to pass in the time we want them to. Maybe He chooses something else, but if you have a conviction, then let's have a conviction, right?
Yeah. And the encouraging thing about this story that I just recapped in Acts is that if you were to grade them on how much faith they had, well, their response to hearing that what they prayed about happened was, you're out of your mind, then you have to go, they had not a whole lot.
Right.
But they had enough. Like, to me, the most encouraging thing is they had enough to even utter the words to God. Right. To just go, this is far out there, but can you do this?
I like that.
And then God's like, yep. With that much faith, I can do it. So whoever's listening to this, if you're like, I even hesitate to pray this, or I'm discouraged to where I could maybe only utter a few words to try to believe this, that could be the starting point. Yeah. And so don't let that stop you from engaging and asking God to come through in miraculous ways.
Okay, this wasn't a planned question, but it just made me think.
You're saying your unplanned questions.
I love this. Don't let it stop you if you have too little faith and you're like, man, I don't know if that's possible. Is it possible to go too far the other way?
You have so much faith that you're in heaven?
Maybe, but like what I'm saying is like, you can be like too big with your prayers or too selfish with your prayers. Like, man, I just want a raise. I want a job. I want this. Like, it all seems selfish or whatever, right? Or it seems like I'm asking for too much. Maybe I shouldn't pray for that. Is that possible to go too far that way?
Casey,
or does that not matter? You just got married and all kinds of stuff. So
you have everything a man could want.
Look at you. This big, bushy beard, beautiful wife.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think it can go too far.
You heard it here first, people. Casey says prosperity gospel is good to go.
Too far. I feel like a lot of times where we stumble through our prayers, right? And if we knew everything that God knew, our prayers would probably look a lot different, right? But He works with what we give Him, and the result is His will. Ultimately, His will is what's going to be done. But I think, to your point, He's looking at our heart. He's looking at our desires. He's looking at, is it something that He's trusting in Himself for, or is it something that He's truly using faith and putting His trust in me to have come to pass? So, I don't know. There's not necessarily a concrete answer there, but I do think it comes down to our heart, right? And where that's at, and that's what God's looking at.
So our motivations are important to God. What our hearts are doing, like, why is my heart doing this thing? Why am I asking Him for something greater? He'll know the indicators. I can't fool Him. He knows my thought life. He knows what I am in secret. Right. So if I'm going, Lord, I want you to bless me with $1 million, I don't think he'll want to give me the $1 million if it's going to destroy me, right? Now, you can still go out and achieve it and get that by your own means to accomplish that, but I don't think that He wants to give to His children things that are not good for them.
It's good,
right? So if I have in myself a desire to go after more or like material things, it would, for me, I'll just tell you where I'm at on it, and I'm not saying that this is a blueprint for everybody, but I don't want more and more things just so I have more things. I want to be given more so that I can do more for the kingdom of God. Like, I want to be able to use the resources given to me to benefit His church.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's like my primary concern in achieving more at work and like growing our business. Like, I want to do that so that I can make more money so that I can do more with it for Him.
Since we're talking about that, I've heard the argument of, well, if God's going to do what He's going to do, why is it even worth praying, right? And I think we definitely have the wrong mindset of what prayer is. If someone's asking that question, they're not realizing what prayer does. It's more for our hearts. It's more for us being intimate with God and one-on-one with God and bringing, treating him like the Father that he is to us versus just saying, all right, whatever, God, you're going to do what you're going to do. Have you guys encountered that question before?
Yeah, it's like a deistic approach. Like God is like a watchmaker and he set it all in motion and just let it go. And like maybe if it's broken, he'll come back and fix it at the right time. But like he's not really involved in your day-to-day life, right? You just don't really... but I've struggled with that thought. Of like, man, you're going to do what you're going to do. Why do I need to pray to you right now? Like that's been in my head before.
Right.
And I found like when I'm afraid to pray or have faith for like... I asked another question. I've had that thought before too. Like, how is this too much? Like, am I asking for too much stuff? Am I asking for too many blessings? Things are already so good. Or when I'm afraid to pray or ask for things or have faith for things because like it's going to happen anyway.
Right.
Maybe afraid is not the right word, but when I'm thinking that way, it's usually because I'm not actually getting in His Word very much, and I'm not actually having conversations with other Christians very much. I might be listening to sermons or worship music enough for me, but like I'm not actually really talking things out with people.
Right.
And I'm not actually reading the Bible myself because that usually puts in perspective of how much He does want to be involved in my life and how much He does want to like put things in motion around me. And it's really, it at the very least points my eyes in the right direction. Right. So my other thought on the whole, like, is it too big? Is it too small? Prayer, or does it even matter, is like if you're struggling with that, I almost say it doesn't matter. This might be a different opinion. I don't think it matters if you're praying for selfish things or for too small of things, but just even to have some kind of faith at all and pray for it at all starts a conversation. Right. And if you're genuinely seeking what He wants and you're asking for what you want within that, He can correct you and rebuke you, and it might not be fun, but He can at least say, hey, no, Ryan, that's too much, or no, that's he's completely capable of saying no as long as we're okay with hearing that. You might just never want to hear it, and that's why you keep asking for the thing that's too big. But I'd say if you're not willing to have faith for something that's too big, or pray for something that's too big because you think it's selfish, then do it, but keep reading the Bible and find out what God's heart really is, so that the conversation is still happening. Because you can go to your dad over and over again, like my kids do all the time. Can we get this? Can we get this? I'm like, no, not right now. Whenever I say not right now, or maybe, that my daughters are like, yes, he said maybe, because that means he's going to say yes eventually. I'm like, how do you know? All right.
They sense the blood in the water.
They see it, right? But I think
they're coming after you.
It's similar with God. Like, it's like there's a verse, like, you keep knocking, you keep talking, you keep asking, and your neighbor's going to give you what you want, not because they want to, but because you're so persistent, right? And so there's a part of our faith that is persistence and asking, that God wants to know, like, do you really want me? Do you really want to hear what I have to say? Do you really want to be around me? Or are you just throwing up an idea that you don't really care about? So if I gave it to you, what's the episode of The Office when Michael Scott is like, I saw a TV episode, a commercial about adopting a child, and it's the most heartfelt moment I've ever had in my life. And he's like, Pam, look into that. She's like, I looked into it. It's 6 months before you even you have to apply to adopt. She's like, I don't even know if I want a child in 6 months. It's like, but it's the same thing we do with our prayers. Like, we'll throw something up, we didn't get it, we forget we even have ever asked for it. But like, are we persistent with that? And do we turn our phones off during podcasts? I don't know. That's something there.
Not my phone. Not my phone. Not my problem.
So anyway, with faith, we're talking about how little that is.
Right. Like,
with a mustard seed is all you have to have. Does that mean I can just say I believe and I'm good? I got a tiny bit of faith and I'm fine?
Right.
Like, what's the next step with that?
Yeah, so Dave had the visual of Peter coming back, and Jesus gives us another great visual here where he's using a mustard seed in a mountain, one thing that's very small and one thing that's very large. And the first part of that verse is saying, ye with little faith, right? So what's in between no faith and a mustard seed? That must have been where they were, because he's still saying you have faith, but it's
right.
not enough,
not
right?
What he wants them to
right. But ultimately, he's giving us a visual of this very little thing. Yeah. This is all it requires to move this mountain, and it's pretty much like just saying, God, I put my trust in you that you're going to move the mountain, right? We're not the ones moving mountains, but we are part of the game. We are part of the plan. And he's just wanting us to have the faith to say, God, you're gonna move the mountain. I trust that you're gonna move the mountain. not me. So I love that visual, that it's encouraging. It's a rebuke by Jesus, right? Saying, ye of little faith. But then he gives a perfect visual of it. It's just this much, this little amount of a mustard seed, and mountains can be moved. Nothing is impossible is what the end of that verse says, right? So
that makes me like another mountain visual. Like if you're on a mountain, and you're falling down the mountain, right? I say you trip,
I've done that.
falling. How much faith does it take to reach out for something? You could like dirt. Maybe you're rolling down a hill, right? And dirt's in your eye. You're just clawing at the ground and just happen to find a root. You don't even know if it's going to hold you or a rock. You just grab on and hold on. You have zero to little faith. Evidence is, if we go back to the beginning, like actual evidence that it's going to hold you. You have no idea how strong it's going to be. But the difference in like falling and saying nothing's going to save me now, and you just go limp and fall and just let what happens happens,
right?
Versus something's got to be there, and you reach out for it and grab on, and maybe a small twig holds your weight somehow.
Yeah,
I think that's
the
difference in no faith and very little faith is like there is an evidence of action when you have even the smallest amount of faith, right? So, it says faith without works is dead. So if you could say, I believe, I have faith, but if there's not some movement, if there's not some evidence after you believe or because you believe, then I don't know that you actually believe. You might just be saying that because that's what you think is the right thing to say, or because that's your culture you've grown up in. Say, of course I'm a Christian. I grew up, my whole family goes to church, but like, are you actually moving in faith towards something, even as small as just grabbing on as you're falling? Like, I need some help. I don't even know if this is going to work, but I'm just.
I think this is a good conversation to have because it's a very little bit that starts it, but it should grow, right? Yeah. Over time, God should come through in your life to a degree like, I trust him more, I trust him more, I trust him more, I trust him more. Because you could get discouraged if your only example of faith in the Bible is Daniel and his friends getting thrown into the fire, and they're like, we're going to throw you in the fire, and they're like, his statement is, God will spare us from this fire. But even if he doesn't, it's just like, what a bold thing. I'd be like, I'm a little nervous about this fire. We know he can, we believe he will, but even if he doesn't, we will not bow down. Like, it's like this. And I'm like, let's go. If that's the blueprint of you got to have this much out the gate, then I'm like, I got a problem.
Yeah.
But I do see that you could grow to that. Right. But at the beginning of faith, it takes very little, but it should grow.
Man.
And I love the combination of faith and works, right? So it kind of ties back to what we were talking about last week, the difference between a Christian and a disciple, where a Christian by title may say, yes, I have faith in Jesus, but a disciple combines that faith and it turns into works with their hands, right?
Cool.
We're talking about head to heart to hands, and that's the faith. That's our faith. That's the Christian faith. It starts with faith, and then it always leads to works. It can't be one or the other, and it can't start with works and lead to faith type thing. It's the heart of it, the root of it is faith. So.
And our trust is ultimately in a person, right? It's not in a religion. It's not in a tradition. It's in a religion about a person. Mm-hmm. That's personal. And so if I'm truly walking with God, my trust in him grows.
I like that. Man, that's good. So one last thought here, and we can wrap this up together. Say our trust is in a person, our faith is in a person. So what if I said, I have faith in Jesus. I don't have to go to church. My trust is not in a building. My trust is not in a book. My trust is not in prayers, because that's action. That's me. That's works. I just want to believe, and I'm good. And God and I, He'll make things work for me. We kind of covered the prayer thing, like it's a relationship. We need to be talking to Him. But walk me through real quick. Why it's a person, but then there's also, we meet together, right? And there's other people. Why can't it just be Jesus? Why do I have to have other people around me? Because they frustrate me sometimes, and they don't do what I want to do a lot of times. And why do I need others in me?
Because if you believe in God, you'll do what he says. And he says to engage with, like, he died to establish the church, not for it to be empty and not a participation of a close-knit group of people. Like that's what he did. He didn't say don't do that. He only ever encouraged deep connection, vulnerability. So if he makes it of primary importance and I don't, then I don't get his heart.
Right.
I like it.
Right. And
he's not done.
For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. So it starts with belief in the heart. Like I take trust in my heart, and then I believe with my mouth and I confess, then I am saved, is what Scripture says about that matter. But if I believe and then it doesn't produce works and it doesn't produce deeper commitment, then either I'm suppressing this truth and not letting it grow, or I don't have it at all.
Right. And to your point, maybe it gets you into heaven, right? If it stops there, where it's just between you and God, but to your point, there's so much that we miss out on about our faith. All the commandments that it's impossible to be obedient to if we're living this Christian life on our own, where it's just between God and I. So it may be a faith, but it's an empty faith, and there's so much that is missing in it if we're doing it on our own.
That's good. I like that. It's not just how little can I get away with, right? Like it's like a teenager trying to get away with like breaking their parents' curfew rules or something. Like, I got home by this time, but it's how close can I get to him?
Yeah.
Like, that's a really cool thought. I like this, guys. Let's come back next week, talk more about faith, and if you guys have questions about faith, throw them in the chat, put them in the reviews. If you would review this podcast, if you're on Apple or Google or Spotify, write some reviews for us. Tell us how funny we are, how smart Dave is.
Do it.
Yeah, Ryan's really funny, right? Dave's really smart. Casey's really there. He's there.
Your beard
Participation award there.
Your beard is epic right now.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I like to compliment a good beard.
Get up real close there, show your beard, and hit the stop. See you guys later.